2 years ago at this time, Tony Blair was saying the troops would be home by Christmas. You look at the record and see, a year ago, the troops would be home by Christmas. He's not saying that this year, is he? He's not saying that this year because Tony Blair's strategy in Iraq is quite frankly in tatters. And in his strategy, the troops plan to be there for a long time to come. The Ministry of Defence have just announced their intentions to have what they call a garrison rotation, where they're going to bring back the Black Watch and they're going to send the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards and the Highland Regiment to replace them. And 2 weeks ago, Alan McCombs and I were talking about what I should say when I went to London and Hyde Park to speak on behalf of the Scottish Socialist Party. And we came with the idea that we could do less, we could do no better than to remind the gathering of the words of a ballad written 50 years ago by the great Scottish songwriter Hamish Henderson in Freedom Come All Ye, where he talks about how women and children the world over cry out in fear and loathing at the skirl of the bagpipes and the sight of the tartan, because for them it was synonymous with murder of their population. That's not what we in Scotland and the Scottish population want to be seen in the rest of the world. And Hamish also wrote about, he wrote about the women and children crying in the Broomielaw on the banks of the Clyde in Glasgow as the young men sailed away in the troop ships never to return, to die in wars in foreign lands. And Hamish offered the vision that this party shares of a different kind of world, where that's not what Scotland's seen about. It's not what the bagpipes mean, it's not what the tartan means, and it's not the best use of the pride of the young people in this country. I want to see young men in Scotland and Britain live long and productive lives. I don't want to see them annihilated in the battlefields of Iraq or anywhere else. And that's why we want them brought home, away from a war where they're not welcome, where they're seen as an occupying army in the same way as the Americans are. That's the justification for bringing the troops back. And the Make Poverty History demonstration in July in Edinburgh realise one thing profoundly, that there is a democratic spirit which is stalking the world. A democratic spirit of the peoples of the world who wants the world to be run in the interests of the peoples of the world, not in the interests of a rich corporate elite, not in the interests of transnational corporations, but in the interests of all the peoples of the world. And that's a potent spirit. Let nobody be under any doubt, historically or today, that is a potent spirit. And yet, New Labour has set its face precisely against that spirit. When they talk about regime change in Iraq, I'm in favour of regime change in Iraq. I've been in favour of regime change in Iraq for 20 years. But regime change, in a democratic spirit of the world, regime change is the business, it's the inviolate and sole business of the Iraqi people themselves and nobody else. That's what democracy means in the 21st century. When I look at Labour Party conference, and Jill and George have already made reference to the plight of poor old Walter Wolfgang. And I don't want to say too much about Walter Wolfgang. What I want to touch on is I want to look at the Labour Party conference, which again this year, not for the first time, passed a series of resolutions at that conference that the leadership are quite clearly intent to ignore. Where's the democracy in a party that has a conference which passes resolutions and the leadership completely ignore it? These people have contempt for democracy, not just in Iraq, not just in the third world, they have contempt for democracy in their own party. And that is clear to me that this is, remember, the party famous for focus groups and opinion polls and sliding with the majority. A party has now set itself against that and now utterly contemptuous of democracy wherever it comes across it. And I have to say to you, nothing better illustrates. People say, whom does this Labour government govern on behalf of? Who do they represent? I raised this question at St Andrews and I was tempted to answer, paraphrasing Bill Clinton, it's the rich, stupid. They govern on behalf of the rich, they govern on behalf of the transnational corporations that control the world. And nothing illustrates the point better than the gate gourmet strikers themselves. 750 Indian women in West London, low paid, abominable conditions, fired on the spot by a Texan billionaire. When the Tories did it, when they were in government, Labour was appalled. Now Labour stands beside the Texan billionaire as opposed to the 750 women in the Transport and General Workers Union. Nothing illustrates the Great Divide. Nothing illustrates who Labour represent nowadays better, in my opinion, than that. And I have to say, when I watched the reports of the TUC, Unison General Secretary, the Amicus General Secretary, the Transport and General Workers General Secretary, the General Municipal Boilermakers General Secretary came on TV and said how disappointed they were in the speech of Gordon Brown. How disappointed they were that Gordon Brown appears to be following in the legacy of Tony Blair. How disappointed that the next Labour leader will continue with the same New Labour mantra. And you have to say it's time some General Secretaries woke up and smelled the coffee. Because if they expected anything less, then they're not sensibly representing their members. Gordon Brown, Tony Blair, Tweedledee Blair and Tweedledum Brown. That's what's going to be happening. And you have to ask yourself, when will union leaders in this country recognise whose interests New Labour represent? And when will they recognise that appealing to New Labour to transform this industrial situation and to scrap the anti-trade union legislation brought in by Thatcher is simply not going to happen. And they have to address themselves to the question that James Keir Hardie and others addressed 100 years ago. And I thought of James Keir Hardie because George is going tonight to speak at the James Keir Hardie Memorial Lecture in Cumnock. I spoke at it last year, so they're good speakers there. And James Keir Hardie, 100 years ago, came to audiences like this, and he said, you see, the Liberals, they don't give a damn about working people. We need to build a party of our own. And together with the RMT, the NUR, and others, he went ahead and he done precisely that. And we've come 100 years, and if James Keir Hardie was standing here, if James Keir Hardie was doing the James Keir Hardie Memorial Lecture at Cumnock tonight, it'd be well worth seeing that. And he would stand up at that meeting and say, you see, the Labour Party, they don't give a damn about working people anymore. We need to build a party of our own. And the Scottish Socialist Party in Scotland is that party. We aspire to be that party. Why can we be confident that we'll build that party? Because New Labour are the biggest recruiters we can find. Because the material conditions that working people find themselves in today are precisely the same combustible material that they found themselves in 100 years ago. Been exploited at work, been exploited right across their lives, indebtedness part of their day-to-day struggle. We can rebuild and re-win the confidence of working people in Scotland by taking the issues that are important to them. The abolition of the hated council tax, where the Scottish Socialist Party and Tommy Sheridan now is a bill going through the Parliament. And we see, by the way, the Unison coming forward and arguing against an income-based tax in favour of a property-based tax. By the way, with an argument which I think is in some ways some validity, where they say we want a basket of taxes, some income-based, some property-based. They want to see that the rich don't flee the country, so they want to tax their property. Well, this party believes it's high time the rich paid their share for a change in taxes, and that the burden of taxes are on the shoulders of pensioners in particular, who are going to jail in England and Wales and protest at the hated council tax. That's a policy the Scottish Socialist Party will be promoting in the Parliament, outside the Parliament in the months to come. We're also promoting our bill to abolish prescription charges. In 3 weeks' time, I'll appear in front of the, not quite the Senate Committee, but the Health Committee of the Scottish Parliament, and apparently I have to appear in front of the Finance Committee as well. Maybe they want to know how it is we raise £12,000 in a month when we'll have a penalty like that. But we're putting the case for a bill to abolish prescription charges, because 50 years ago, Anaya and Bevan and those people who established the health service believed in a socialist principle that if you were ill, you got treatment. That's the principle that underpins our bill. If you're ill, you get treatment. Not if you're ill and can afford £6.50. Not if you're ill and you're rich enough, you get treatment.